Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to, let me just check, day 27 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 4, day 27. And we are just today starting chapter 12. Chapter 12 is titled Dhruva Maharaj Goes Back to Godhead. Right, so yes, there are 52 verses in this chapter 12, and we've divided them up into 7 sections as follows. First section is from verse 1 to verse 7, and we've titled that Dhruva Maharaj Meets Kuvera. You may recall, right at the end of chapter 11, Swayambhuva Manu told Dhruva Maharaj that Dhruva, by attacking the yakshas so extremely heavily and just killing so many of them, that this was a great offense to Kuvera, to Lord Shiva and Kuvera, because Kuvera has very strong connection with the yakshas. Then second section is verses 8 and 9, just 2 verses. Dhruva asks Kuvera for a blessing. Then third section, verse 10 to verse 15, Dhruva Maharaj rules the world. Fourth section, verse 16 to verse 18, Dhruva goes to Badrik Ashram. And section 5, verse 19 to verse 38. So in other words, it's a longer section. Dhruva Maharaj goes back to Godhead. Then sixth section, verse 39 to verse 43, Narada Muni glorifies Dhruva Maharaj. And finally, the 7th section, verse 44 to verse 52, the results of hearing about Dhruva Maharaj. Let us chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Shatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasa Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so devotees, let us get started. Section 1, verse 1 to verse 7. Dhruva Maharaj meets Kuvera. Right, so let's have a look here. Yeah, there's plenty of purports in these first 7 verses. So we will read, first of all, we'll read through just the verses, then we'll come back and do the verses and purports. Verse 1. The great sage Maitreya said, "My dear Vidura, Dhruva Maharaj's anger subsided and he completely ceased killing yakshas. When Kuvera, the most blessed master of the treasury, learned this news, he appeared before Dhruva. While being worshipped by yakshas, kinnaras and charanas, he spoke to Dhruva Maharaj, who stood before him with folded hands. Verse 2, the master of the treasury, Kuvera, said, O sinless son of a Kshatriya, I am very glad to know that under the instruction of your grandfather you have given up your enmity, although it is very difficult to avoid. I am very pleased with you. Verse 3. Actually, you have not killed the yakshas, nor have they killed your brother, for the ultimate cause of generation and annihilation is the eternal time feature of the Supreme Lord. Verse 4. Misidentification of oneself and others as I and you on the basis of the bodily concept of life is a product of ignorance. This bodily concept is the cause of repeated birth and death, and it makes us go on continuously in material existence. Verse 5. My dear Dhruva, come forward. May the Lord always grace you with good fortune. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond our sensory perception, is the supersoul of all living entities, and thus all entities are one without distinction. Begin, therefore, to render service unto the transcendental form of the Lord, who is the ultimate shelter of all living entities. Verse 6. Engage yourself fully, therefore, in the devotional service of the Lord, for only He can deliver us from this entanglement of materialistic existence. Although the Lord is attached to His material potency, He is aloof from her activities. Everything in this material world is happening by the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Verse 7. My dear Dhruva Maharaj, son of Maharaj Uttanapad, we have heard that you are constantly engaged in transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known for his lotus navel. You are therefore worthy to take all benedictions from us. Please therefore ask without hesitation whatever benediction you want from me. So now, devotees, I will go through the verses and the purports from verse 1 to verse 7. Verse 1. The great sage Maitreya said, My dear Vidura, Dhruva Maharaj's anger subsided, and he completely ceased killing yakshas. When Kuvera, the most blessed master of the treasury, learned this news, he appeared before Dhruva. While being worshipped by yakshas, kinnaras, and charanas, he spoke to Dhruva Maharaj, who stood before him with folded hands. Yes, because Kuvera, he's a big man. He's a very important man amongst the demigods, master of the treasury of the demigods. And, sort of technically speaking, Dhruva is just a worldly and a king from planet Earth, not on the level of the demigods. So verse 2, the master of the treasury, Kuvera, said, O sinless son of a Kshatriya, I am very glad to know that under the instruction of your grandfather, you have given up your enmity, although it is very difficult to avoid. I am very pleased with you. Verse 3. Actually, you have not killed the yakshas, nor have they killed your brother. For the ultimate cause of generation and annihilation is the eternal time feature of the Supreme Lord. So we have a purport here, short purport, but nonetheless, it's a purport. So Kuvera has said that Dhruva is sinless, but of course Dhruva thought otherwise. Yes, and Swayambhuva Manu presented otherwise too. But Kuvera said actually ultimately Dhruva had not killed any yakshas, so he wasn't sinful. He did his duty as king as ordered by the laws of nature. And Kuvera said that similarly, Dhruva should also not think the yakshas had killed his brother. Rather, he died in the course of time by the laws of nature. So Kuvera said, eternal time, one of the features of the Lord, is ultimately responsible for annihilation and generation. You are not responsible for such actions. Verse 4, misidentification of oneself and others as I and you on the basis of the bodily concept of life is a product of ignorance. This bodily concept is the cause of repeated birth and death, and it makes us go on continuously in material existence. So, similarly, there is a purport here, sort of moderate length purport. I and you, aham tvam, conception, as separate from each other as due to forgetfulness of our eternal relationship with the Lord. Krishna is the central point, we are the parts and parcels, like legs and hands are parts of the body. So when we understand our relationship with the Lord, separateness cannot exist. So, Prabhupada gives an example. The hand is the hand, the leg is the leg, but when they work together, there's no distinction. They're part of what constitutes the whole body. Similarly, when living entities are Krishna conscious, there's no distinction of aham tvam, because everyone's engaged in Krishna's service. Since the Lord is absolute, the services are absolute, even though the hand works in one way, leg in another way, but since the purpose is the Lord, they're all one. So of course this is not to be confused with the Mayavad all is one idea. Yeah. The real knowledge means hand is hand, leg is leg, body is body, but all together they're one. As soon as we think that we're independent, then conditional material life begins. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the conception of independent existence is therefore like a dream. One has to be in Krishna consciousness, his original position. Then he can be freed from material bondage. Verse 5, my dear Dhruva, come forward. May the Lord always grace you with good fortune. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond our sensory perception, is the supersoul of all living entities, and thus all entities are one without distinction. Begin therefore to render service unto the transcendental form of the Lord, who is the ultimate shelter of all living entities. Okay, so we have a purport here. Also, Prabhupada brings out the point that the word vigraham, having specific form, is very significant because it indicates that the absolute truth is ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead. which is explained in Brahma Samhita, Satchitananda Vigraha. He has form, but it's different from any type of material form. So the living entities, us, we're marginal energy, not different from the supreme form, but not equal to the supreme form. Dhruva is advised to render service unto the supreme form. This will include serving other individual forms. For example, the tree has form. When water is poured on the root, the other forms, leaves, twigs, flowers, are automatically nourished. And the Mayavad idea that because the absolute truth is everything, he must be formless, is rejected here. Rather, what is confirmed here, the absolute truth has form, but is still all-pervading. Nothing's independent of him. Verse 6, engage yourself fully, therefore, in the devotional service of the Lord, for only he can deliver us from the entanglement of materialistic existence. Although the Lord is attached to his material potency, he is aloof from her activities. Everything in this material world is happening by the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is continuing from the previous verse, where it was said that devotional service, that Dhruva should engage in devotional service, but devotional service can't be rendered to something impersonal, to the impersonal Brahman. How could you do that? The impersonal Brahman, which is not a person, just some sort of energy or something like that. How can you render service as such to that? So, for devotional service to be there must be a servant, there must be service, and there must be someone who is served. So the Lord is the served person, the activities are called service, and one who renders service is the servant. So, this is another important feature of this verse, is that only the Lord, no one else is to be served. Confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Mam ekam sharanam vraja. To me only you should surrender. So there's no need to serve the demigods. They're like hands and legs of the Lord, and when the Lord is served, the hands and legs are also served. They don't need to be served separately. Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 12, verse 7. Tesha maham samudarta mrityu samsara sagarat. Which means the Lord, to show favor to the devotee, directs the devotee from within in such a way that ultimately the devotee is delivered from the entanglement of material existence. And really, no one but the Supreme Lord can help us be delivered from the entanglement of this material world. The material energy, of course, is one of the Lord's potencies, parasya shakti vivadaiva shuryate, as much as heat and light are potencies of fire. So the material energy is not different from him, but at the same time he has nothing to do with it. Little subtle. The living entity is marginal potency and is entrapped by the material energy on the basis of his desire to lord it over the material world. But the Lord is actually aloof from this. But when the same living entity engages in devotional service, he becomes attached to this service. And this situation is called yuktam. Yuktam. Yeah. Yuktam and yoga are kind of synonymous. Maybe not 100%, but there's a very strong relationship between them. So, but anyway, for the devotees, the Lord is present even in the material energy. That's his inconceivable potency. Material energy is acting in three modes, and they produce the actions and reactions of this material world. And of course, the non-devotees, they become involved in those activities, those actions and reactions, material nature, whereas the devotees are dovetailed with the Lord, and so they're freed from these actions and reactions of the material energy. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the Lord is therefore described herewith as Bhavachidam, one who can give deliverance from the entanglement of material existence. So, okay, verse 7. My dear Dhruva Maharaj, son of Maharaj Uttanapad, we have heard that you are constantly engaged in transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known for his lotus navel. You are therefore worthy to take all benedictions from us. Please therefore ask without hesitation whatever benediction you want from me. So, okay, there's purport here too. Dhruva's already known, he's famous throughout the universe as great devotee. And such a devotee is worthy to get just whatever benedictions anyone can offer, including the demigods. He doesn't have to worship the demigods separately to get these benedictions from them. So, Kuvera personally offered any benediction that Dhruva wanted. Bilvamangal Thakur said that for the devotee, all material benedictions wait like maidservants. Mukti Devi is waiting at the door of the devotee to offer liberation or more than liberation. So to be a devotee is very exalted. Just by doing devotional service, one can have all the benedictions available in this world without separate endeavor. So Kuvera said to Dhruva that he had heard that Dhruva is always in samadhi, very advanced. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in other words, he knew that for Dhruva Maharaj there was nothing desirable within the three material worlds. He knew that Dhruva would ask for nothing but to remember the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord constantly. Right, so that's the end of the first section. Now we go on to the second, which is very short. It's just 2 verses, 8 and 9. Dhruva asks Kuvera for a blessing. Verse 8. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, when thus asked to accept a benediction from Kuvera, the Yaksharaj, king of the Yakshas, Dhruva Maharaj, that most elevated pure devotee, who was an intelligent and thoughtful king, begged that he might have unflinching faith in and remembrance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For thus a person can cross over the ocean of nescience very easily, although it's very difficult for others to cross. So Prabhupada says, experts in Vedic rites experts in Vedic rites may say that, they do say, they give different opinions. They say there are different benedictions in terms of Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Yeah. The Chaturvargas. So, but of those four, generally liberation is considered the highest, it's known as the highest Purushartha, or benediction for humans. But Dhruva wanted a benediction higher than the highest Purushartha. That is called Panchama Purushartha. When the devotee comes to this Panchama Purushartha level, the fourth Purushartha, liberation, becomes insignificant. Panchama, by the way, means 5 or fifth. The fifth benediction, yeah. So Prabodhananda Saraswati, great devotee, said that for the devotee, liberation is hellish. Sense gratification in the heavenly planets is will-o'-the-wisp, means valueless. So yogis try to control their senses, but for the devotees it's not difficult at all to control the senses. The senses are compared to serpents, snakes, but for devotees the serpent's teeth are broken. Means the serpent cannot do us any harm. So Prabodhananda Saraswati again said that all benedictions of this world are valueless for the devotee. So Dhruva, of course, Dhruva is very intelligent, Mahabhagavat. Unless someone is very intelligent, they can't take to devotional service or Krishna consciousness. So, therefore, every first-class devotee is a first-class intelligent person who's not interested in any material benediction. So, Dhruva then was offered a benediction by Kuvera, whose only business is to supply riches to people in the material world. Kuvera is described here as the king of kings, because unless he blesses you, you can't become king. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the King of Kings personally offered Dhruva Maharaj any amount of riches, but he declined to accept them. He is described therefore as Mahamati, very thoughtful or highly intellectual. Verse 9, the son of Ida Vida, Lord Kuvera, was very pleased, and happily he gave Dhruva Maharaj the benediction he wanted. Thereafter he disappeared from Dhruva's presence, and Dhruva Maharaj returned to his capital city. Right, so there's short purport here. Kuvera is pleased with Dhruva because he didn't ask for anything material. So Kuvera is a devotee, of course. Shiva's his brother, and he's a devotee. But he's a demigod. So therefore we might wonder why did Dhruva take a benediction from him? But the answer, and it's a very good answer and important answer, that for a Vaishnav, it's possible to take benediction from a demigod if it's favorable for advancement in Krishna consciousness. Even the gopis, they were asking anyone and everyone, even the trees, even the animals, please bless us to get the mercy of Krishna. And Prabhupada gives an example here, the gopis with Katyayani. They worshipped Katyayani, who is Durga and is normally worshipped and even today is worshipped for material benefits. but they worshipped Katyayani, the gopis, just to get Krishna as their son. So the Vaishnava is not interested in taking benedictions, meaning material benedictions, even from Krishna. It is said, if a Vaishnava is offered liberation by Lord Krishna, the pure devotee will refuse it. Dhruva Maharaj didn't ask to go to the spiritual world, but he asked that he be always able to remember the Lord. He wanted to be respectful, so he didn't refuse Kuvera, but still he wanted something favorable for advancement in Krishna consciousness. Okay, devotees, let's go through the verses and purports of section 3. From verse 10 to verse 15, and we've titled it, of course, Dhruva Maharaj Rules the World. Verse 10. As long as he remained at home, Dhruva Maharaj performed many great ceremonial sacrifices. In order to please the enjoyer of all sacrifices, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The prescribed ceremonial sacrifices are especially meant to please Lord Vishnu, who is the objective of all such sacrifices and who awards the resultant benedictions. Right, so purport is here. Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 3 verse 9, that one should work only to please the Lord, basically. Otherwise, if you work for any other reason, you're going to become entangled in reactions. So, yeah, like that. So according to Varnashram, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas are advised to do big yagas and distribute charity. So, sometimes they accumulate riches by sinful means. For example, Dhruva, while ruling, had to kill yakshas. For Kshatriyas to do like that, kill yakshas, it's necessary, may be necessary. So Kshatriya is not a coward, cannot be non-violent. To rule the country, he must be violent. All right, so let's see. Okay, we have another paragraph in the purport. So, therefore, Prabhupada says, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas should give 50% of their wealth. Yeah, because they have wealth. They really have wealth. Kshatriyas tax, and Vaishyas do business and sell things and so on, maybe particularly dairy products, but all sorts of things also. So they have wealth. So they're advised, give 50% of your wealth, 50% of your wealth to the devotees, or to the temple, or for Krishna consciousness. Bhagavad Gita, towards the end, says even sannyasis must perform yajna, dana, and tapasya. These things are never to be given up. So, the sannyasis must do tapasya, vanaprasthas must do tapasya, penance, austerity. Kshatriyas and Vaishyas must give charity, and brahmacharis in the beginning of life must do yajnas. Okay, so carrying on further with the purport. Dhruva Maharaj, as ideal king, practically emptied his treasury by giving charity. The king must not just collect taxes and spend them for sense gratification. Monarchy, the monarchical system, has failed because kings collected tax and spent for their own personal sense gratification. So this corruption is still going on, whether monarchy or democracy. So now it's democracy, but they're trying to hold on to power very busily. Politicians don't have time to think of the welfare of the people. Sometimes they take 80 or 90% of the taxes and spend lavishly for themselves. Previously they did big yagyas as described in Shastra. Now these yagyas are not possible, so it's best to do Sankirtan yagya. Householders can do it with family and distribute prasad. This is enough for Kali Yuga. And this actually, devotees, this is the basis of the Krishna consciousness movement. Chant Hare Krishna, distribute prasadam. The government can help. In this way, the whole world can be peaceful and prosperous. Fourth paragraph. Previously, in all material yagyas, there are offerings to demigods. Thing is, demigod worship is for the less intelligent. And ultimately, the results of sacrifice go to Lord Krishna. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, verse 29, extremely famous verse, actually I know it well. Bhoktaram yaga tapasam. So, he's the enjoyer of all sacrifices and austerities. Krishna is Yagya Purusha. So now we go on to the fifth paragraph. So Dhruva Maharaj, he did demigod yagyas, etc., at related things, to set an example that everyone should engage in sacrifice. Some people are not able to become Vaishnavas. They're just not ready for it. But they may be ready to do something in which they get some return, some money back. So therefore he did demigod yagyas to set an example, because if not, these people would, they wouldn't do yagya. Unless Dhruva Maharaj set the example, they wouldn't do yagya, they'd just be materialistic. So he did many yagyas, gave so much charity. While a householder, he never spent a farthing for his sense gratification. In this verse, the word karma palam is significant. The Lord awards karma as living entities desire. So as the Super Soul, he's so kind. He gives everyone full facility to do whatever they like. And then they take the resultant reactions. So, but Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, similarly, if anyone wants to engage himself fully in devotional service, the Lord gives him full facilities and the devotee enjoys the results. The Lord is therefore known as Karma Pala Prada. Verse 11. Dhruva Maharaj rendered devotional service unto the Supreme, the reservoir of everything, with unrelenting force. While carrying out his devotional service to the Lord, he could see that everything is situated in him only, and that he is situated in all living entities. So the Lord is called a tutor because he never fails in his prime duty of giving protection to his devotees. All right, so let's have a look at the purport. Dhruva did many sacrifices, we talked about that a bit, but he also did his occupational duties in devotional service, like he's the king. He's got to manage the kingdom and see to all the different functions of the kingdom. So then Prabhupada goes on to say Ordinary karamis want to enjoy fruitive results, so they're only interested in sacrifices and ritualistic ceremonies from the Vedas. And even though Dhruva did many sacrifices as an exemplary king, he was constantly doing devotional service. Lord always protects devotees, and the devotee can see the Lord everywhere. Ordinary people unfortunately can't understand how the Lord is in everyone's heart, but the devotee can see him there. The devotee can also see how everything's resting on him. So this is the vision of the Mahabhagavat. He sees everything everyone sees, but instead of seeing trees, etc., he sees only the Lord, as everything is resting on him. That is the vision of the Mahabhagavat. This is possible for devotees who are on elevated levels of devotional service. And then Brahma Samhita speaks of Premanjana Charita Bhakti Valochanena. Only those who have smeared their eyes with the ointment of love of Godhead can see everywhere the Supreme Lord face to face. It's not possible by imagination or so-called meditation. Right, so devotees on to verse 12. Dhruva Maharaj was endowed with all godly qualities. He was very respectful to the devotees of the Supreme Lord and very kind to the poor and innocent, and he protected religious principles. With all these qualifications, he was considered to be the direct father of all the citizens. So let's have a look at the purport here. First thing is Dhruva's exemplary personal qualities as a saintly king. That's what being described here. But yeah, actually all heads of government, not just kings, must have these qualities. Then the citizens will be happy. They thought of Dhruva as their father. And if the governments now will be like that, then the citizens, like children, depending on an able father, they'll be satisfied. But you think you're going to get that today? Good luck. But so Prabhupada says, now there's no guarantee by the government of even basic necessities like food, like protection of lives and properties. So in the second paragraph, it's pretty substantial actually. Prabhupada says, significant word is Brahmanyam. Dhruva Maharaj was very devoted to the Brahmins who engage in the study of the Vedas and thereby know the Supreme Lord. And nowadays, the state should be very respectful to societies who spread God consciousness. They should do. But now no state will give help to such movements. I mean, I think it's extremely rare to non-existent, really, like that, yeah. Okay, so, and it's very hard to find anyone in the state administration who has any good qualities. They sit in their positions and say no to every request, as if they were paid to say no to the citizens. Prabhupada. And there's a lot of truth in it. So the word Dina Vatsalam is very significant also. It means the state head should be kind to the innocent. Now the state agents are well paid, they pose as pious, but they allow the running of slaughterhouses for killing innocent animals. Just see. So there's no comparison of the qualities of Dhruva with the qualities of today's leaders. So of course Dhruva was king in Satyayuga, Now it's Kali Yuga, and the governments are just bereft of good qualities. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, considering all these points, the people today have no alternative but to take to Krishna consciousness for protection of religion, life, and property. Verse 13. Dhruva Maharaj ruled over this planet for 36,000 years. He diminished the reactions of pious activities by enjoyment, and by practicing austerities, he diminished inauspicious reactions. So, there's a purport here, certainly. Prabhupada makes the point that the fact that Dhruva ruled for 36,000 years means he was here in Satya Yuga. Because then, in those days, the people lived for 100,000 years. So, in Treta Yuga, 10,000 years, Dwapara Yuga, 1,000, Kali Yuga, maximum 100. And not many people at all reach 100. So as the yugas change, the duration of life and memory, quality of kindness and other good qualities diminish. Yes. By executing pious activities, you get higher material enjoyment, but due to impious activities, you have to undergo severe distress. Krishna, it's too much. That heavy distress. So we must avoid the impious activities. But the devotee is not interested in happiness or affected by distress. When the devotee is prosperous, he knows he's diminishing pious results, and when he's distressed, he knows he's diminishing impious reactions. And he doesn't care, the devotee doesn't care about enjoyment or distress. The devotee just wants to do devotional service. So Srimad Bhagavatam says, devotional service should be apratihata, unchecked by happiness or distress. And the devotee undergoes austerities, like doing ekadasi and other fasts, following regulative principles, and thus the devotee becomes purified from reactions from his or her past impious life. Then because the devotee is doing devotional service, which is the most pious activity, the devotee enjoys life without separate endeavor. Verse 14. Verse 14. The self-controlled great soul, Dhruva Maharaj, thus passed many, many years favorably executing three kinds of worldly activities, namely religiosity, economic development, and satisfaction of all material desires. And thereafter he handed over the charge of the royal throne to his son. So let's have a look at the purport. Prabhupada says, interesting, perfection of materialistic life is attained by observing religious principles. That leads automatically to successful economic development, and then there's no difficulty in satisfying material desires. So anyway, Dhruva, as a king, had to keep up the status quo, or it would have been impossible to rule the people. So he did it perfectly. He looked after the people. But as soon as he saw his son was ready for the throne, he immediately handed it over and he retired. Okay, second paragraph here. Prabhupada says there's a particular word used here which is very significant, avichalendriya, which means that Dhruva was never disturbed by agitations of the senses. It also means his sensory powers didn't diminish, although he was very old. How about 36,000 years old? I'm 72. That's pretty old. So his senses were still young, but he wasn't interested in sense gratification. He remained self-controlled, and he performed duties perfectly by the materialistic standards. That's the behavior of the great devotees. The example is Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, son of a very rich man, but he had no interest in enjoying material life. But when he was entrusted to do something in state management, he did it perfectly. Lord Chaitanya told him, internally keep aloof, but externally do your material duties as they need to be done. So, this transcendental position can be achieved only by devotees, as Bhagavad Gita says. Others, like yogis, try to control the senses by force, but devotees don't use the senses because they're kept. The devotees don't use the senses for themselves because the senses are engaged in higher transcendental activities. Let's have a look here, verse 15. Okay, let's read verse 15. Srila Dhruva Maharaj realized that this cosmic manifestation bewilders living entities like a dream or phantasmagoria, because it's a creation of the illusory external energy of the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada makes the point that if you go deep into the forest, sometimes it may appear that there are big palaces and cities, but this is technically called Gandharva Nagar. It's hallucination, in other words. Similarly, in dreams, our imagination creates many false things. And the devotee knows the material world is temporary. It's illusory, but it appears to be true, like phantasmagoria. But behind this shadow creation is a reality, the spiritual world. And the devotees are interested in the spiritual world, not just in its shadow. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, since he has realization of the supreme truth, a devotee is not interested in this temporary shadow of truth. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Param Drishva Navartate, Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, verse 59. Okay, devotees, so we will conclude here for the day. Shri, Shri, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Jai.